Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. I'm so excited for this week's podcast. On the podcast is someone I've known for a while on social media, and she reached out to me when she wanted to start a podcast, and it's the fabulous Deneen L. Garrett. She's a passionate, innovative executioner who leveraged several years of program management, HR, and leadership to launch Deneen Consults. It's a consulting, coaching, speaking organization similar to what I do in my work, so I'm excited to get the juice from Deneen today. She's also the founder and creator of An Intimate Conversation with Women of Color podcast. So fellow podcaster, published author, active on 2 boards, and she's joining us on the podcast today. So excited to hear her story of how she got to the driver's seat and, her tips and strategies for owning your career. So let me invite Deneen to the conversation. Welcome to this episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm delighted to have Deneen Garrett with us today. And Deneen, I hyped you up in the intro, but let's get into the conversation. Welcome. It's good to see you again.
Yes, it is. Happy National Black Women Pay Equity Day.
Yeah, equal pay. I saw your post on LinkedIn, and power to Black women. I feel like it's the year of Black women. I don't know about you, but I feel like post 2020,
absolutely,
not that Black women weren't rocking and magical before then, but I just feel like there's an amplification, more conversations about what Black women can do. Do you feel the same way?
Oh, absolutely. And what it is we've known it all along, right? We've known it amongst one another, but it's now other people are acknowledging it.
Yes.
And that's what's happening. So other people are acknowledging it. And we are speaking out more, right? And definitely post 2020, because that's when I seen the shift.
Yeah.
I would definitely say I saw the shift, honestly, after, it was during the height of the pandemic, and it was after the murder of George Floyd. I believe we're like, you know what? I know my worth, and I'm not going to accept anything less.
Absolutely. I kind of feel like there was some further fuel or amplification with Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, just the conversations that turned to Black women. And, I'm on this high, if you will, from Sheryl Lee Ralph, winning the Emmy. Like, she's got me all amped up for brilliant. Like, not that I didn't feel good before, but
right.
I feel good right now. And so you have a podcast for women of color. How long have you been doing that?
Yeah, so going back to, 2020, that was a pivotal year for me, in general. And then personally, I launched my podcast on Good Friday.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's been over 2 years. And as a matter of fact, so I did take a pause in March. So in March, I did a shift. I started doing these conversations in Black audio events on LinkedIn. So I paused the podcast. So I kicked that off for Women's History Month in March, did that for, a few months, took a break, and just started back recording the podcast. I have one more interview tomorrow, and I will release the episodes the first Friday in October. And it's an intimate conversation with women of color.
That's awesome. And so you have recently made some changes in your full-time career. Tell us about what you're currently doing and what prompted the shift for a new
Yeah.
chapter in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll kind of start back and then kind of come up. So in January of 2021, I made a decision that I would retire on my birthday this year. And I was leading our company's Women of Color program. So, I was doing a thing with that, continuing to provide women of color with tools. Now, this isn't a workplace. I'm talking about women of color, which, like you said, is my podcast, my externally, and then also my job for 18 months was to lead our program. So, providing women of color tools to navigate spaces as women of color. It was a program for high potential and high performing women, just leading all of that, taking it to the next level, leveraging it for myself because I knew I was leaving. So, your podcast is about being in a driver's seat, and that's exactly where I was. I was in a driver's seat for myself, made that decision. And so fast forward to this year, I saw somebody tweet something about a dream lifestyle. So they took it beyond a dream car or a dream house and said a whole lifestyle. So I adopted live as my word for 2022. And then my focus has been to live a dream lifestyle. So fast forward to now, I am retired. I retired in June. And I am now started my own business, Deneen Consults. And the business is to empower women of color, Black women, to live a dream lifestyle and to do that now, not to wait for any particular time, but to do it now. And so even taking a step back, core for me is travel. And so I travel a lot. I have always, but I was very intentional this year specifically to show people this is how I'm living a dream lifestyle. So I was doing it, I was living it, I was sharing it. And then, I introduced the business.
I love that. So where does the passion to have a focus on empowering women of color come from? Because it sounds like it was happening in your full-time work and then transitioned over to this new chapter in your new business.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about it is I would say I really got focused on women of color in 2016, 2017. So in the workplace, I was in diversity and inclusion, and I led three of our diverse segments. One in particular is LGBTQ plus, and I was preparing my colleagues, who pretty much were white, for an LGBTQ plus conference. I was preparing them to do a leadership workshop, and so I'm thinking, well, where are the women of color? And so I created a panel for LGBTQ plus women of color and allies. I proposed it to the organization. They accepted it. And so from 2017 through 2019, that was one of their most popular panels. So as I said, in April of 2020, I launched my podcast. But prior, people were like, what's next for you in relationship to the panel? And I said, well, I'm thinking a podcast. And so the intention was for the podcast to be for LGBTQ plus women of color and allies. But the way that it happened, as life does, I opened it to women of color in general. My first guest was a woman of color who was not in the LGBTQ plus community. And so I just opened it up, right? Instead of just having it niche down so much, I just opened it. And so, I talked to women of color who are in the community. Most of the women that have been on are not, but plenty have. So anyway, it was I say I go from panel to podcast, and that's my journey, which is what I shared with people. And so surprisingly, the end of December of 2020, my leadership was like, hey, we're moving you over to lead this program. So it's my passion specific and being intentional started with a panel for work in conjunction with work. Then it became personal, the podcast. And then it became, hey, guess what? We're going to now, pay you to really focus on women of color. And so it just stayed. It stayed.
Wow. I feel like there's 3 P's in there. There's something around the P is the letter P. That's awesome. So awesome that you get to do that. As you think through your career and even what you're doing now, talk to us about what you think is your formula for successfully owning your career.
Yeah, so there's 3 Ds that I pretty much live by. Or, when you think back about how I operated, whether it's in corporate, outside of corporate, getting to this place where I am now, the 3 Ds that I followed was to dream,
Mm.
right? I had to dream about what it is I wanted. Then I had to decide, well, what is it going to be? And then drive, right? So drive, my own career, drive, the path that I'm going to take in life. So those are the 3 Ds that when I actually look back, that's what I followed. So now that's what I, teach and share with other people when I'm doing speaking engagements.
Mm. Talk to us about drive. What does that mean?
Get
Because
it
I think
done.
you can
Go
pick
for
up
it.
dream, making decisions. Talk to us about what you do in drive.
Yeah, the drive is the action. The drive is to go ahead and execute. It's to make those things happen. It's to do something, right? Because you can dream all day long. You can even decide, okay, yeah, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to do. But if you never get going, if you never start to drive, if you, will, then it's just a dream. It's
Mm,
just a decision.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I'm all about the driver's seat.
I
So
know, right? That's why I was like, oh, she's
drive,
going to love
drive,
this.
drive.
Drive
Oh,
and beep, beep as you're passing people by, right?
that's right. That's right. Beep beep. Here I come. Here comes Deneen. I love it, Deneen. I'm watching you on social media, and you're doing all sorts of interesting things. What was going on in your mind, or what conversation do you have to make decisions? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
a big decision to close a
Yeah.
door. I don't know how many years you were at AT&T, but probably quite some time. I know when I was back in my corporate days, it was about almost 16 years before I decided to step out.
Yeah, no, it absolutely, you know what, it is a huge decision. And people are like, well, how did you transition? I said, honestly, I transitioned back in January of 2021 when I made the decision. So I had
Mm,
already left, if you will. Um, I left from a maybe a mindset. Left not as in I checked out. It wasn't that. It was I knew what I was going to do. I knew when I was going to do it. And so I just needed to get to that. And by me being passionate about women of color, it was all perfect for me. And I remember having conversations with people saying, so it's like a 9-month program that would have ended in February 2022. And so I know I said to people, like, I didn't tell anybody my plans. There was maybe one person in work that knew. Um, and so I said, well, I'm good until February, which again is when the program was going to end. So for that year, that's when it was going to end. So I'm like, cool, right? I knew what I was doing up until February. So it really would have just been about, okay, what's going to happen from February through when I actually left. Well, they made it so easy because they changed the programs. They just totally changed development. And actually, I don't even know what changes they've made. But what we were doing, they said that's it ends, right? So everything that we were doing, all the different programs that we were doing, they made a decision to, as someone said, control alt delete, right?
mm, mm,
So it just worked out so perfect for me. It's like, oh my God. So I knew that I was doing the right thing
mm,
because that thing that I was doing, it was ending in February, right? Period. It was ending. It wasn't even about, okay, now let's prepare for this year. No, it was a wrap on that. And so what was happening afterwards, really, them trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do? And so the timing, everything just worked out so well. So again, I made the decision like 18 months, a year and a half before I actually physically left. So there really wasn't a transition for me, if you will. It
mm,
was like, okay, because I was waiting for the date.
mm,
And that's it.
mm. So what do you say to people who are wanting to make a decision for a new career chapter, but they're possibly afraid, or, what advice do you have for sticking to the decision once you make the decision to move towards that next chapter?
Yeah, so your why has to be greater than anything else. So
Mm,
your reason for wanting to make that change. And for me, a lot of it was, or what kind of pushed me is just people are so dismissive with others. They're at times they're callous with you, right? When they're business focused, it's all about the business and less about people. And when it continues to become less about people, um, then it's easier to make decisions, right? It's easier for you to decide. Again, what we talked about in 2020, the shift there is my worth is greater than any and all of this. And if I'm going to grind, I'm going to grind for myself.
Mm.
And right. And you have to be prepared. So, like I said, I made the plan 18 months and I put in the work. I dreamed, I'd made a decision, and then I started putting in the work to make it happen for me because I had to make sense financially. And so, when I said I was waiting for my birthday, it's because that's when it truly made financial sense for me.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're considering all things with the decision. It's well thought out before
Yes.
making a change. What do you think about the terms, the great resignation and quiet quitting? Only because you brought up, the space in making the decision and the timing. What do you think about those terms from a career standpoint?
Yeah, so the Great Resignation is definitely what people, coined that time frame. But I look at it as it was an awakening. I really look at it, it was an awakening.
Mm.
It was like, again, time out. Like, I'm done. Like, I did all of this for you, and you're not recognizing me for it. You're not
Mm.
rewarding me for it. So, okay.
Mm.
And it's like, depending on who is your supervisor, your leader, whatever, depending on what their experience is, it could hold you back. It could also push you forward. And so you're at the mercy of another person. And, as far as are they a true leader or are they just a supervisor? And you find that a lot, like I have. I find a lot that most people or a lot of people are supervisors. They're
Mm.
not leaders. So they're not really equipped to help you move on to the next level. Some people are intimidated. Some people, don't care, whatever it is. But it's you make that decision that, what, that's no longer, I'm not going to let that be my issue anymore. I'm not going to let that drive me. I'm going to go ahead and own it and go for what it is that I want. Now, I will say that it doesn't have to be, everybody just leave your job. Again, don't, unless it makes sense for you, or
Mm.
unless you're in a situation to where they just make it so unbearable. And it was, for me, it wasn't like it was any of all of that, but it was like, you know what? Yeah, I choose me. And so, like, for the past year or so, seeing people on LinkedIn posting, oh, I'm, started this job and I'm this and I'm that. Congratulations to you for choosing you. I
Mm.
love to see it. I absolutely love to see it. Like, I clap for people, right? I clap for them because that's just great. That's great that that happened for you. I also clap because it lets me know, that those things that I want for myself, those things will happen as well.
Mm. I love that. It's resonating with me because I think through my time in corporate and how you come to that decision making point where you're like, okay, prioritize yourself. I choose me. I like to say, bet on you. You got to, be the biggest better on yourself. Like, you can't
Absolutely.
expect people to bet on you if you're not willing to believe in yourself and bet on yourself. So I love the choose you, choose me. Let's go, everybody, audience. And so, what resources, Deneen, were helpful to you to think through the decision, make the decision, and to continue going?
Yeah, so what the main factor for me was about my finances. Like, what would it look, and I had a calculation done. What would it look like if I left now, which at the time that I requested this, it was March versus when my birthday of this year, and it was a huge difference. So I
Mhm,
said, I'm good. I can wait.
mhm, mhm,
Right? So that checking the finances, making sure that things are, in alignment. And then it even got to the point to where and so this is how I really knew that I was okay with my decision, is
mm,
when it was even like, well, if I were to leave before then, I'm okay with it.
mm,
So it even got to that point to where is, for whatever reason, if I departed prior to my birthday, I would be okay with it. So I would have, yes, I would have taken that loss, but I would have been okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so another thing too is with the medical, right? Like, okay, knowing that I would have to pay for my own health insurance, being okay with that as well. But it's getting at, again, it was all around the benefits of what's, so the financial benefits, the health and all of that, just being aware of what things would look like after I left versus what they look like. And what was more important, was I going to let those things keep me in a place where I no longer wanted to be? Or was I okay with it moving forward? And it was like, well, you know what? I can always get a part-time job, or I can always do this or do that, for additional streams of income. So the mind shift was more about growth. It's like, okay, no, these things are not going to hold me back. I'm moving forward. And if I need, this is what I'll do. I'll take action.
Mm. What strategies have you come across that have been helpful to getting the right mindset? Because what you're talking about is really leaning into your mindset and believing, apart from the financial or economic things you've talked about,
Yeah,
income, possibly income and medical. You have to have a belief that in yourself that you can achieve standalone, achieve on your
absolutely.
own. So what did you do to tighten up your mindset, or it was just there all along?
You know what? So it's something that for me developed over time, right? And it develops by seeing it happen with other people. It develops by even seeing it happen with myself, right? This isn't the first decision that I made, and it worked well for me, So it's like thinking about, well, remember that time when you wanted XYZ and you got it?
Mhm.
Yeah, you can do the same thing, right? So it's just that awareness and knowing, and it's also a trust and faith, right?
Mhm.
Like, okay, don't get hung up on because I can't see around the corner. Do you want this thing? It goes back to that, that dreaming and deciding, and then even within that, the dream of decision is about you wanting something. So
Mhm.
your why for it, like, what is that why? And is it stronger? And so for me, and I will tell you, all along, I planned on being retired. So I
Mm.
really wasn't planning to start a business.
Anything. Mhm.
Right. It was like I really just, plan to, be retired, travel whenever I wanted to, continue to do philanthropic work. I am on a couple boards, so continuing that. And it was really friends who were like, girl, you got a lot to give. So
Mhm.
it's not over, so why don't you consider this and why don't you consider that? And so that's where Deneen Consults, my business, came from, really from friends pouring into me and saying, no, you have so much more that you can offer. And so the intention initially was for me to consult with businesses and to help them create women of color programs.
Mm.
Right. I said, okay, well, I'll reach out to a few people because in the course of the work that, when I was doing it for the company, there were women who were like, oh my God, more companies should have this. This is great. And I'm like, okay, making a note,
Mhm.
I heard it, but I wasn't focused on it at the time. And then later, with those conversations, I'm like, okay, all right, y'all, so that's where Deneen Consults came from. And then the conversation shifted to you should coach.
Mm.
And, initially I was like, because, I'm like formal. And they're like, girl, you don't do anything like formal. Like, and so they gave me the permission to do what I do, how I do. And so when I, acknowledged that and accepted that, I'm like, I'm even more excited to do the coaching piece than the other piece.
Mhm.
Right. So I'm very excited about that. And I'll tell you a situation that really drove it home for me. A cousin of mine had retired from the education system maybe a year or so ago. And I just thought she was going to go ahead and pursue interior design,
Mm.
which is something she had an interest in. And then a few months later, my mom mentioned, oh, she's back at another education system. And I'm like, oh, okay. But then on Good Friday, so that's a pivotal time, right? This past Good Friday, she was sharing like, oh, I can't this, I can't that because of work. Like the work was in the way of so many different things. And I was so sad for her
Mm.
because you don't retire from somewhere. Retire means you put in a lot of years somewhere, right? To
Mhm.
be able to actually retire. So you put in a lot of years somewhere and now you jump into the same thing. I'm like, no, in retirement, whatever it is that you're doing needs to fit your lifestyle as opposed to you fitting it. And so I was more determined to help and to empower women to live their dream lifestyle now.
What is a dream lifestyle? Tell us what a dream lifestyle is.
You know what, honestly, it's different for different people. You have to define that for yourself. It's a mindset, it's a way of living. You have to define it for you. And like I said, for me, number one is like travel. Travel is number one for me. Another would be like community, events, like I love events. And then also the philanthropic work that I mentioned. So those are like three key components for me. And I'm still developing like, okay, now let's add this into it, right? Because it's fluid. Right? It's like you don't make that decision, that dream one time and decide on just this and that's all it is. It could be, or you pivot. You're like, you build upon it. And that's what I'm doing. So like I had the three core components, and now it's kind of like I'm building on that and kind of defining it a little bit more as to what it looks like for me. But it's travel. I have at least 3 trips planned between now and the end of the year.
Nice.
There will probably be more.
What's the best place that you've been to? What's your favorite?
So I don't necessarily have a favorite. It's more so about the experience there. I will tell you that I have a newfound love for Los Angeles, for LA. Like LA is probably the place that I've traveled to the most, but never liked. And that's because my experience has been either you were paid in full or you were broke. I didn't see it in between until Issa's Insecure. So her show Insecure exposed me, introduced me to Inglewood, to South LA, to okay, that's where the Black folks are. Have money and whatever. So now I'm staying in Inglewood. I'm staying in West LA, which is a historically Black area. I'm intentionally going to those places that she exposed me to and love it. Love it. Like I have a newfound love. And so when I say travel, I don't even necessarily mean to these exotic locations. I mean, if I want to go tomorrow to the DuSable Museum in Chicago, I'm going to pop on a plane and go and come right back. That's what I mean.
All right. That's that dream lifestyle. I love it. I love it. You are inspiring our audience. Take notes, audience. I love that. I love that idea, how we get in our own way and we limit ourselves. And you talked about so many things, Deneen. You talked about managers, being leaders or not. You talked about making pivotal decisions, really having the right mindset, affirming yourself, betting on yourself. I wonder if you think about your career body of work, what if you were to write a book about it, what would the title be?
Oh, you know what I think? So for me, honestly, so my signature talk is Live a Dream Lifestyle. That's what I'm focused on. So that will be it. Live a Dream Lifestyle. That's what I'm pushing right now. I want everybody to live it, whatever that means for you.
Awesome. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I know we go way back, and It was nice to meet you back. I think it was in June of this year. Yeah, in June of this year, we got to meet. And if you follow both of us on social media, we got a photo. Anyway, Deneen, please tell our listeners how they can stay connected with you if they would like to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So deneenconsults.com is my website. And so that will link you to other social media, but definitely that. And for those who are, on active on LinkedIn, find me there, Deneen L. Garrett.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Deneen, for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.